There was something little perfect. Guys, we're ready to start whenever you guys want. Take your plates in here. You're very welcome. Sit down with your pizza. Sorry we didn't have any drinks. Again, that was my fault. So thank you all for sponsoring the pizzas and the drinks. Again, my fault because they didn't order them. You have an announcement? Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's remind everybody we're on BocaJS.org. If you go to videos.bocajs.org, not only can you watch this video live, and someone actually had reminded me if you have any issues seeing the code, if it's too far away, the video's there for tomorrow. Oh my. And also, you're welcome to take one. You're welcome to take one. And also to check out, oh, thank you. So if you go to BocaJS.org, that's us. I don't have a link to videos like a crazy man. I will probably change this website. That's us. That's Jeremy. Those are the founders over there. So check videos.bocajs.org. Goes to my YouTube channel. If you like what you see here, you can see it there. If you like what we're doing here, thank me by simply subscribing to the channel. I promise you, we won't spam. You don't need to hit the bell. But if it reach 100, then allow me to have bocajs.youtube.com. That's my goal. There's a whole goal. For 2 years of doing this, that's my goal. So, oh my.
It's not secure.
Oh my. It should. So that's a problem right there. No? Wow. I'll have to fix that. Oh my.
Is it video? Video?
No, that's not. It's certainly a Bluehost. Videos. Wow. I gotta fix that.
There it is.
And as you can see, we're live right now. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Screw these guys. They're not gonna listen. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we have all the different events. If you scroll down, we have the events, what happened at Code Camp, other big videos that we've had in the past, and I will promise you I will click, there's too many black square dots, we'll fix that. Anyways, you're in BocaJS every month. We have an event related to front-end UI. We have the major, thank you so much for the pizza. Thank you very much for Sendine Spaces. That's places you're in right there. If you're looking for a co-working space, come see Amanda. She has amazing, best location, best prices in South Florida for as far as co-working spaces and all that. So they're ridiculously cheap. When I had to work at Universal Studios, I've been working for a while, I actually worked in one of those offices. I don't longer work there, but that was what I would love to be able to work for my own office, and I would choose one of these places. Joel has been a big presenter for a long time, and he knows what he's doing, and I want to hear more about this forgetting password.
Let's get started then.
Let's get started. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very, very happy to be here. Yeah, so let's get started with this. Passwords. We're all familiar with passwords. Passwords were first introduced in 1961 at the MIT. Is this a little bit too loud? I can kind of hear an echo. Sorry, Damien. Yeah, they were first introduced in 1961 at the MIT by a professor who I can't remember the name, and I didn't put it in my speaker notes, but doesn't really matter. Essentially, what happened is that they had this major supercomputer, as big as this place here, and they needed to share the time on it. So they needed to find a system to be able to bill the people that were using the computer. So they introduced passwords. So that was 1961. 1962, there was the first password breach ever. So somebody got a hold of that file that had all those passwords in it, and they were able to use the time of the other people. Yet we're still using passwords. So for some reason, we haven't learned our lesson. And every single time there's another breach, and every other day we hear about another password breach. So passwords are fine. It's a way to identify a user, but definitely we can do better. There's different solutions that we can use. So I'm gonna try to convince you to stop using passwords altogether. That's kind of my goal today. Actually, it also reminds me. Sorry, I was in an Uber once. I'm a bit of an introvert. Sometimes I don't feel like talking, and I was just like in my little bubble. And the guy was just yapping, and he was talking, and he was telling me all this story about this new job that he got. And he was a new college or new graduate from a college, and he just got his first job at a local clinic, and he told me the name of the clinic, and he told me that he had been there for 6 months, and he was just talking about all of that, and then he started asking me questions because I wasn't very participating a lot in the conversation. So he started asking me questions. It was like, yeah, what do you do for a living? And I didn't really want to go into the details, so I just said, yeah, I work in internet security. And it was like, oh, you're one of those guys. I was like, what does that mean? It's like, oh, I hate you guys. You put all those password policies, and I have to change my password every single month, and I hate all of that. And I was like, yeah, I agree with you, actually. Putting all those limitations is definitely not a good way to make password more secure. It's like, what do you mean? Well, I said, well, you know what? I bet you that your password is the name of your clinic that you're working for, starting with a capital letter, followed by a 6, because you need to change it every month, and you've been there for 6 months, followed by an exclamation mark, because you needed 1. And he was just like, and he stopped talking all the rest. So pretty sure that was his password. So let's talk about password, but first of all, a little bit about me, very quickly. My name is Joel Lord. I am French Canadian, actually, hence the charming accent. I currently live in Toronto, and I'm very happy to be here and escape the winter for a few weeks. It's been awesome. I was here for CodeCamp as well. Thank you, Scott, for this amazing event. It was really, really nice. So if you haven't heard of South Florida CodeCamp, definitely go next year. I work as a technical evangelist at Auth0, so basically what I get to do for my living is just to learn about cool stuff, learn about new stuff that comes out, and then I go to various conferences and meetups, and I talk about that. At Auth0, we have an identity management platform as a service, so I'll just plug it right really quickly. Basically, if you ever need to build a login screen, you can use our solution. If you know Cognito, who talked to me about Cognito earlier? Jeremy. So yeah, we're basically a replacement to Cognito. So, you know. And if you ever want to reach me, Twitter is always the best way. I get very, very excited whenever I have a Twitter notification. So by all means, Joel with 2 underscores, Lord. It's a shitty Twitter handle, but you get what you get. All right, passwords. Passwords are bad for a bunch of reasons. Right, I'm just going to try to convince you in case you think that password is still the way to go. Let's look at the different costs associated with password. A recent Forrester research established that every single time that a person calls a help desk because they forgot their password, it's going to cost you $70, or you or your company. $70, that's huge. Well, it's not that much, but if you consider that, say you're a bank and you have hundreds and thousands of users, most of which are not necessarily technical people, that $70 per call will add up to a huge amount. So the cost of the help desk, all the costs associated with the technology. You cannot have an authentication server on an old machine. You need to be able to catch all of those brute force attacks that you might have. So you need to always make sure that all of your equipment that runs your secure data is up to date and it has the latest hardware. And that has a big cost associated with. And of course, there's all the management and all the maintenance costs. It's something that we often forget as developers. We'll put up something, we'll put up a login form for our application, we'll ship our application and just forget about it. It works, right? But there's always new ways to hack into servers. There's always new patches that you need to put up to date. You always need to make sure that all of your equipment and all of your software is up to date and secure. And that also has a cost. And it's one that we often neglect. Most of the time we just ship our software and we forget to continually update it and make sure that we're not vulnerable to. There's also the impact of the breaches. We hear about a new breach every now and then. There are so many breaches. 2017, I don't have the data for 2018 yet, but 2017, they estimated 2.7 billion data records that were compromised. Those are the known breaches. That's a lot. That's a lot of data. And out of those 2.7 billion records, about 4% of those records are the owner of the data is certain that there is no way that the hackers could actually decrypt the data. So 96% of those records were potentially decryptable by somebody. There's also a cost associated with that directly. Interestingly, Yahoo, in 2017, I believe, they announced that they announced that they actually had a data breach a few years back. They had lost 1.5 billion records, and they were in the process of being bought by Verizon. And they had to tell that information because of different laws. And Verizon actually negotiated $350 million less as soon as that news was out. So they had a huge loss just due to that password breach, or that data breach. If somebody asks you to spin up your own system and you don't have the time and you want to convince them that you should not deploy your own and you should use a solution that is already made, this site is scary as hell. So breachlevelindex.com, they have all kind of information about all the different records that have been breached and so on. Have I been pwned as well? It's a very interesting website where you can just type in your email address, and actually if you type in mine, you will see a password that I used to use a few years back in plain text available right there for you. So, you know, there's a lot of information that is available about you. All right, on the security side of things, nowadays we have so much computing power. It is so easy to brute force into passwords, right? Because we have all of that power available to us, we can use, like if you really want to find somebody's password, you can try to brute force, and you can actually have access to a bunch of computers in the cloud and make sure that you find that password really fast. So we have to be careful about that. Social media presence, so important. If you still use secret questions as a mode of authentication for your users, please don't. Stuff like my mother's maiden name, the name of my pet, all of those things are available publicly on Facebook. So if you just Google me, you can probably find the name of my pet. Actually, I don't have a pet, so no. But you can definitely easily find my mother's maiden name. That's a very easy one to find. So be really careful when you're asking for those security questions. And users will always be your weakest link. It doesn't matter how secure you make your systems, your users will always be your weakest link. Remember this? That was last January. So there was this alert where there was a missile coming into Hawaii. It was an accident. They sent this message to everyone. So there was an interview with Jeffrey Wong, operation officer at the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency. And that was an interview on public television. I can't remember which channel. And if you look very carefully, right there, there's this password. So people are not careful with their password. They'll share it with people. They'll put it on Post-its. They'll just leave it all over the place. People are not conscious of how careful they need to be with their passwords. All right, finally, usability. I mean, I hate passwords. 23% of users admit having only one password. And I'm sure it's higher than that. Who uses only one password here? Oh, come on. There has to be at least one. Statistically. There's one in the back. Okay. Who uses two passwords, one for everything and one for banking? Yeah. A lot of password is hundreds. Yeah, okay. A lot of people will do that, especially in the non-technical people, and there's an obvious reason for that. I mean, more than 60% of users use more than one device on a day-to-day basis. So they have their phone, they have a laptop, they have a computer at work, and there's no way you can remember all those passwords for all those websites, so people just keep reusing the same one. And we all hate passwords. So Scott, you have hundreds of them. That was my 1Password this morning. I have 335 logins in there. And I started using 1Password when I started at Auth0 just over a year ago. It's one of our policies at the office, and 335 different logins, all with randomly generated 25 characters long passwords. There's no way I can remember all of that. So that's why people reuse, right? Some companies still use very weird restrictions on their password. IHG is one of the largest hotel chains in North America, and their password policy is 4 digits. 4 digits, I can easily brute force 4 digits in a day manually by just trying some random stuff. I mean, this is completely ridiculous. I actually got hacked once because I travel a lot, I get a lot of points, and somebody hacked into my account and booked a different hotel room somewhere. And when I called them and I was like, yeah, I definitely didn't book a hotel room in Hong Kong or whatever it was. And they were like, oh, that never happened before. I was like, yeah, I'm sure it didn't. You meant today. Yeah, probably. So you must all be using password managers, right? So you've all had that issue where you create a randomly generated password, you know, by using your password manager, and you get that error. Like, okay, minimum 8 characters, at least 1 upper, 1 lower. That's what it is. But still, it doesn't work. As software developers, be careful about that. Be conscious that some people are using password managers, and make sure that you actually test for those. There's nothing more annoying than getting those errors when you're actually, and that password was right. I just had to delete the last character, and it suddenly picked it up and was able to let me log in. Oh, and there's always this case, of course, where you punch in your username and your email, and then, not that one. So maybe password with a 1 at the end, no. Maybe password 1 exclamation mark, maybe. And you just keep on trying, but you can't remember what your password was. So, you know, you go through all of the process of forgot password, get the email, reset the password. Password cannot be the same as the last used. It's like, that happens to me all the time. All right, so what can we do? There's a lot of different things that you should do as software developers to help with that. The first one is making sure that you're using the best or latest best practices in everything that has, or everything regarding security, one of which being OAuth. Who's familiar with OAuth? Who was at my talk in September? Same people. Oh, that's great. There's a link at the end of my talk where for my video on BocaJS.org, where you can actually see my talk about OAuth. But very quickly, one of the OAuth basically has different flows to help you to authenticate, kind of dictates this framework on how machines should communicate between each other and how to delegate access to resources to another machine. So basically, you have a user that tries to log into your application. The application will try to access some data on the API, and if you're not authenticated, it will deny access to it. So you redirect your users to an authentication server, and it's the responsibility of that authentication server to validate the identity of your users. So it will take care of either through a username password form or passwordless or whatever mode of authentication that it wants to use. But all the authentication happens here. Once the user is authenticated, you share a token from the authorization server to your web browser. And then your web browser will be able to use this token or this key to access some data on the API. And the server will be able to provide you with the resources. So the important part here is having this authentication server, this one single point that manages all of those things like your user credentials and everything else. And then you don't have to bother with that on your front-end application or on your API. So definitely a great way to help you with that. There's a lot of free solutions out there. Cognito is one, Auth0 obviously, Okta, and so on. By all means, try to delegate if you can. It is so dangerous to have to handle all of those user credentials, and there are so many solutions that you can use, so many OAuth servers that are available and free for you to use, like most social providers. So Twitter, Facebook, Google, and so on, they all have ways to integrate with their API, and you can connect through that. And then in that case, you don't have to deal with it. And it also helps because your users already have so many different accounts and maybe they don't trust your website because it's a new one. So it actually helps with conversion rates as well by being easily able to use a one-click sign-in via Google, for example. Makes it a lot easier and a lot less frictions for a user to actually sign in. So it helps with the conversion rates. And multi-factor authentication. Only 28% of users are actually using multi-factor authentication on most of the major websites. We should all be using it, at least. And as a developer, you should make sure that you give that option to your users. Multi-factor authentication, very important. A lot of people confuse that. It is always 2 out of those 3, at least 2 out of those 3. So something you are, something you have, or something you know. Having password and security questions is not multi-factor authentication, because those are both things that you know. So you have to use another one. Something you are could be biometrics. Something you have can be your phone. SMS are better than nothing as a multi-factor authentication, but be aware that there are ways to hack at scale a lot of different accounts using the SMS second factor authentication. And mostly we need to forget about those passwords. For my friends and family that are not technical, I've tried to convince them to use a password manager. It's still not a very good experience. It's kind of hard to deal with that. So one thing that at least I try to encourage them to do is not reuse the same password over and over and over. So if you have friends and family members that are in the same position, a very easy tip is to just use the same password every time, but at least change the last 2 characters for like connecting on Facebook, for example. Use whatever password you usually use, FB, and for PayPal, use same password, PP. Things like that, just a small trick. So at least it's not the same password over and over, and bots won't be able to reuse the same password if they find if there's a password breach somewhere. So that already helps, but of course we should definitely use password managers. There's a lot of free options. I use 1Password. I really, really like it. It integrates with the Touch ID on my, both on my phone and my laptop. So I can access pretty much all of my passwords just by using my fingerprint. Makes the experience a lot easier. But we're developers here, so what can we do as developers? So that's the important part. There's a lot of different alternatives available to you. So the first one is WebAuthn. Who was telling me today that actually the spec was officialized yesterday or today or like very, very recently. So it's not part of the W3C approved specs. WebAuthn is a way to authenticate on websites using an authenticator. Authenticators themselves can take multiple forms. Oftentimes you'll see them as but this one is a YubiKey, but it's just a key, a USB key, and there's one button on it. So it doesn't do anything, it doesn't really validate anything, but having the actual key is your key to the websites. You can also use the Touch ID on MacBooks, laptops, and I think they're working with the Hello World with Microsoft Windows, I don't know, anyways. They're working on a bunch of different authenticators. So basically it's an open protocol and everybody that has an authenticator can actually use it. The API itself has a lot of boilerplate code in it, and I'll show you a website that has all the details and kind of goes through all of the details of WebAuthn. But basically the only thing that you need to do is to create a set of credentials by using navigator.credentials.create. And you pass it a bunch of different options, and you will get an attestation object, which will have an ID as well as a public key. If you want to authenticate your users, you use navigate.credentials.get, and this will be able to validate or to log in your users. The interesting thing about WebAuthn is that it actually creates a private-public key pair generated by your authenticator, or with the help of your authenticator, but it will also generate all of that based on the URL that you have. So by using authenticators like this, no phishing attacks are possible anymore. Google recently released an article saying that they didn't have any phishing attacks in the last year. That's since they've been using their own authenticators internally. So nobody can actually try to send you an attack using like a fake URL. It really helps with that. All right, so very quickly, let's take a look at what it looks like. So if you're interested in WebAuthn, webauthn.me is a good resource, very interesting. I've also discovered just a little earlier today, I think it's webauthn.guide. Very, very good resource, very well done by the Duo security team. So they kind of go through all the steps of all the code that you need to generate and so on. So very, very good resource. WebAuthn.me is interesting because it actually has an interactive demo in there. The keys itself, I have one right here. Basically, it's just one button, like I said. So the first thing that you'll want to do is to register. So your browser will send a request to the server asking for a challenge, and then it will ask the authenticator to be a trigger. In this case, I'll just use my USB security key. And then the public key is generated, sent to the server, and it generates a pair, private public key pair that can be used afterwards. So you have your ID as well as your public key right here. Once your user wants to log in afterwards, you will just use your ID, and you'll log in, and it will do the same type of process. It will send a request to the server through a relying party. You'll be able to use your authenticator, and it just validates into your browser. And you're logged in. So very, very simple to use. As you've seen, I've never inputted a password in there, so all of it was generated automatically for me. The only thing that I need to have is my little dongle here, my little key. There it is. All right. So very, very simple to use. There's a lot of boilerplate code to go through. It's not an easy API to use, so it's not perfect yet. I'm assuming that we'll see a lot more libraries coming out to kind of help with all of that stuff. And WebAuthn.me, I know the owner of the site, we try to keep it up to date as much as we can, and as libraries will come and be made available, we'll try to update the site with that as well. A lot of people say, yeah, well, isn't that annoying to have to use your key all the time? True, you actually need the physical device to be able to log into the website. On the other hand, we already do that most of the time with house keys. So we're used to that. It's no more difficult than using a house key. And you always do it. Nobody thinks of using a house key as being a bad thing, right? Yeah, that covers pretty much the YubiKeys. Biometrics are also more and more used as a way to authenticate people. I use, when I cross the border between USA and Canada, as a frequent traveler, I can go through the machines, and they will do a retina scan when I go into Canada, and fingerprints when I go back into the US, or come into the US. So they're being more and more used, and there are actually a lot of different ways to be able to use it nowadays into your applications. Face recognition is an interesting one. The way it works basically is that it will take a picture, it will take the gradient of colors, so try to establish the contrast from 4 different angles, and that will give you, where is it? That will give you a map of the face, in this case, a cat. Once you have that, you can establish different points that you're looking for. So if you're doing human face recognition, you'll have anywhere between 68 to 120 different biometric points in your face that you try to find. If you're looking for a cat, there's 9 points, I think, a little bit more easy. And what you're looking for here is the different ratios between the different lines. So if we take the cat on the left side, has kind of a flattened face, so the ratio between the 2 ears is a lot larger than the one, and the ratio between the eyes, for example, is a lot larger than the one on the right. So you kind of have all of those ratios between a bunch of different points, and by that you can establish if somebody is who he says he is. As I was saying, there's a lot of solutions that are now available. There's a bunch of open source libraries that are available for use, even in JavaScript. So just look it up, face recognition, JavaScript. I've seen one using WebAssembly recently, which is kind of an interesting one. But there's also some APIs that are free to use or very, very cheap to use that you can actually take a look at. One that I've been using recently and I really liked is VoiceIT. Where is it? All right. Let me just make sure that this is started. All right, seems to be working. Okay, so from here I can, so the first thing that you'll need to do, of course, is to enroll, which will record your face, generate all of those different points, all those ratios, measure all of the thing, and then once you're enrolled, you can actually verify. All right, and you can verify that you are who you say you are. So this one will work by taking a bunch of different pictures. It will help with a lot of different things. For example, and that's always a thing with face recognition that you have to be aware of, is no, not this. This type of attack. All right, so be careful about that. If you have to play with face recognition, VoiceIT has a system in place where they can do the liveness check, basically asks the user to smile or yawn or do a bunch of random different stuff, which will help to prove that you're actually a real human and not a picture. Interesting fact as well, because I've worked with those guys to do a joint blog post at one point. They have systems in the back that actually does a bunch of different checks, and they can recognize if somebody's using a picture. So they once actually called me immediately after I actually did that in a demo. And they said, like, oh, I think you've been hacked, or somebody's trying to use your system with a picture. So it was kind of funny. They can actually detect it, but if you're implementing a solution, make sure that you have checks against that. Damien, you said it recognizes the people all the time, or only recognizes the one user, so you're right. So if I try to change my face a little bit, fooled it. All right. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Fun thing about face recognition is this right here. It's a little bit small, sorry. But you can see the confidence level. That's very important. In this case, the first time I tried it was 87%, 84%. With the picture was actually 94%, so I actually had a better score there. And when it failed, oh, not in this code, but even when it failed, it kind of still usually gives me around 45%. So it kind of recognizes some of the features in my face, but not at a high enough confidence level. So that's the interesting thing with biometrics, is that it will never be black or white. You will never recognize for sure 100% a user, but you'll be able to establish different confidence levels. And that makes it for very interesting authentication methods. So by using a camera, you can very discreetly do that mode of authentication, for example. But if you're, say, a banking application, maybe you want to give access to your users to see the balance of their account. If you're 75%, that is them, but maybe you'll want a 95% confidence level to enable them to do withdrawals, for example. So you can actually base different actions on your website based on the confidence level of your authentication. So it can make up for some very interesting stuff there. All right, so biometrics, very interesting stuff, very cool. Be very careful. There's one big thing that you have to be aware of is that if you store the information about the user, be very careful about that. While a password, you can still change it, it's really, really hard to change your fingers once you've been hacked. But on the other hand, it's a lot harder for hackers to actually be able to impersonate you. They could always cut off your fingers, but then it's not something that is easily doable at scale. All right. And the last one that I really, really like, and I think that we should definitely see it more often, is the magic links. So you've probably seen it in Slack. Slack uses those pretty much every time that I log into a new Slack. I always use it nowadays just because, you know, opening my password manager is one step more. So I'll just sign in, click on email me a link, open my email, and just click on the link, and Slack will open. I've recently noticed that Amazon was also using it. So I was at a hotel at one point. I didn't have my phone with me, didn't have my password manager, and I really, really wanted to order something on Amazon, because why not? And I actually noticed that they have this, and of course I know the password to my email, so I was still able to log into my Amazon account by using that magic link. So without using your password, it makes your life a lot easier. They're really, really easy to implement. In the context of an OAuth server, you would have something like this. So this would be my authentication server. And basically, you would need two different routes, one to authorize your users, the other one to log in your users. So the authorize post to /authorize would be when the user gives you your password, his email, sorry, and you will generate a token or a key to be able to access a resource. I'm using a Node Express server right here. And basically, you'll just generate a magic link. I'm using a UUID, so just use a random, long string. Store that into a database. It's a very simple example, so in-memory storage. But and then make sure that you expire those links. That's one of the big pitfalls. Make sure you need to expire those links, because at one point, if you don't expire them, people will be able to just try some random links, and they will actually be able to log into the system. Then you just generate all of the email stuff, getting prepared to send the email. And that's pretty much it, actually. There's not more than that. So you just send an email with the magic link. That's it. You will also have a get route that available to your users, /login/magic link. And in here, you will, whenever you get a request, you will check the magic link, check if it exists in your database. Once it's been used, you should destroy it. So they should always be single used. And once you actually found it, you know that there's that's a valid link. You can generate a token. So I'm using a JSON Web Token library available on NPM here. So you just generate a token, and you will pass that token back to, and you redirect your users back to the application. So very, very simple to implement. About 100 lines of code total, and you have a magic link authentication server. You don't have to deal with passwords anymore. You don't have to deal with securing all of that data and making sure that there's no breaches. The only information that you're storing in this case is the email of the users. You should still be careful about it, but a little bit less. Did anyone attend my session at CodeCamp? Good, because I'm using the same demo, basically. Actually, you've probably seen the same demo if you were here in September, because I'm always using the same demo. So I have this, application, basically, that has two different routes, an API with two different routes, a private one and a public one. So the public one will just simply generate random clickbait headlines, stuff like that. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Ugh. All right, and the other one will generate random clickbait headlines featuring yours truly. But this one is protected, so if I try to access that information, I don't have an access token with my request, so I cannot view this information. So the only thing that I'll do is to log in, and now we have our login form, which only has an email. I'll log in, and it simply takes care. So that was the post to /authorize. So it just generates a link, store it in a database, and sends it to me by email. If I go to my email, it should, in theory, be here. So you receive your magic link, and you're redirected. By clicking on it, you're redirected back to your original application. Now I have my access token. So you can use your So the access token, like I said, is the key to your API. If you want to learn more about JSON Web Tokens, I'll get back to the link with this. But basically, you can see the information here in my token. So I have my user ID, the permissions that I have, username, a bunch of different things. So that was the JSON Web Token that I generated when I've successfully authenticated my user. So now that I have this token, I will send it with all of my requests. So I can now click on the awesome headline, and I am getting the data from the private API. All right, so very, very easy to use. Definitely, you should, as developers, try to offer that as an option to your users. It makes your life easier as a developer, but it also makes the user's data a little bit more secure. So definitely something very, very easy to start using and to start implementing. So that's definitely something that I think you should start looking into. Very quickly about the future of identity management. We're seeing a lot of very, very interesting stuff coming out in the identity world. A lot of things like the WebAuthn new protocol. It's not quite there yet. It's a little bit hard to use, but it's getting a lot more traction. One of the really, really cool things, and I've already talked about it because I'm so excited about it, but it's the confidence level on the authentication. So instead of having a black or white authentication, yes, user is authenticated or not, there's a bunch of things, and I think we're going to see more and more ways to kind of try to guess if a user is authenticated. Amazon already does something similar, and I'm not sure how it works, but you might have noticed that you'll log in sometime, or you'll go to Amazon.com sometimes, and you'll be shopping. You'll see your postal code, zip code up there. Like it kind of recognizes you. It says, "Hi, Joel." There's a few personal information on the web page, but if you actually try to buy something, it will ask you for a password again. And that's pretty much what it does in the background. Like I said, I don't have all the details of how it does it, but basically it kind of checks. It recognizes up to a certain point that, yeah, it's probably you, so it shows some information about you. It helps you to shop. It gives you access to everything. You can see the shipping rates and all this stuff. But as long as you don't try to buy anything, it won't ask you for another password. But if you try to do something like buying things, then they really want to be sure that it's you, so they're actually going to ask you for a password to be 100% certain that you are who you say you are. So I think we'll see more and more of that, especially with the machine learning stuff. I've seen people working on trying to recognize just based on mouse patterns and the way people are typing. They're kind of trying to recognize if a user is who he says he is. So really, really cool stuff coming out there. Finally, I want to let you with a few resources. If you are interested in OAuth, I kind of mentioned it, but very, very quickly. This is my BocaJS video, actually, where I talk about OAuth and OpenID Connect, a little bit more details. JSON Web Tokens, if you want to play with tokens, that's a great resource to get started there. WebAuthn, the demo, there's a bit.ly link there. And finally, there's a blog post that I wrote with how to integrate VoiceIt as a second factor authentication with Auth0. So interesting read if you're interested in that as well. All the links are available on passwordless.tech. And that's it. Thank you very much.
That's amazing, Joel. You have a website just for the talk. That's beyond the best speaker we've ever had so far. You guys have any questions for Joel here with passwords or OAuth, the corporation, or anything like that? Anything you may want to know about the weather tomorrow? It's the same as today. It's Florida.
Quick question about those physical keys, the dongles that you're showing earlier. Let's say someone is sharing an account, like a wife, and a husband, for example. can you have two physical keys that both are authenticated with the same account?
Good question. I don't know. I think you can create, I'm not 100% sure there, but I think you can create multiple accounts with one key. But I don't think you can do the opposite. So you cannot share. Yeah, I don't think so. But I'm definitely not sure. Okay. But you should never share information anyways. So. Yeah, you're using two different keys for one account. Right. Yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah. And yes, and that's right. I'm actually using it for Facebook as well. I have two different keys for the same that I've used for my 2FA for the same account. So, and you said different access levels as well is possible to do. Okay, so you can configure AWS for with different access level based on the keys that are used. Cool.
You mentioned 1Password. I know Apple has it built in also. Is that about as good as 1Password for? Yeah, they do. What I'm saying. Well, they're similar.
A password. Yeah. I'm not familiar with it. I haven't tried it.
No, they have it built in with Face ID. It gets you. It saves all your password and does like the long.
Okay.
Yeah, on your device. Is that?
The difference is you can log on to multiple devices and all of them share the information.
Yeah. So yeah, 1Password is a little bit different in the sense that it's basically a database of all your passwords, so you can see your passwords. So say you go to, I use it, and that's the most annoying use, but when I get to a hotel and there's Netflix on the TV, I need the password for my Netflix account, right? So I can open my phone, check up the password, but I don't think that Apple's integrated. You can see the passwords? Yeah. Oh, well.
Yeah, you go to, there's passwords and account right there in your settings. Yep. And you just authenticate.
Huh, okay, well, I didn't know that.
But yeah,
but,
if that was like as good or similar.
That works great. I don't know if it comes to other devices. If you have Apple devices, yeah, my iPad has all my passwords. But on Safari. Is it Safari?
Yeah.
Because I had that with Chrome, like all my Chrome devices, my Chromebook, my Mac, my Chrome has it. But that's it. Yeah.
I mean, Chrome's password manager, for example, was as good as 1Password or any other one, right? The issue, or not an issue, but the thing is, it didn't, I think it does now, but it didn't generate random passwords for you. So basically people were just using the same password over and over still, and it would save it, but you're still using the same password. So if it, as long as it generates new passwords, I think the only one that had a breach or something, or I think it was a breach, but data was not compromised, was no, one of the passwords manager. And I can't remember which one, so I don't want to say something in case somebody sees the video. But there's 1Password manager where there was a leak, but I think the data was not compromised. But so you probably still want to do some research. Obviously, people will try to attack password managers and try to find ways to access that data because it's, Yes, exactly.
But does it scale?
Yeah.
Let's go down the line. I like it.
So
you're next. Prepare your question.
So what's the course of action if somebody loses one of those keys?
What happens when you lose the key? Yeah, you're stuck. So as developers, you will need to put in different ways to authenticate. So don't rely on that one only, because yes, people will lose the key. That's for sure. Once they lose the key, you need to have a password reset basically, and redo that same thing. So you can basically you'll destroy all of the keys that were used before, or the security keys that were used with the physical key, and then you will generate new ones, or find a new way to authenticate your users. But you still need a forgot password or forgot my key or whatever it is, a way to authenticate.
Thank you, Joe. Any other questions, guys? They're just exciting about the raffle that happens because of you afterwards and all that. So we still have time for questions. All right.
I'll
Thank you,
stick around
Joe.
if there's anything else. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
for having me.
There might be. We're not going home just yet. If you guys are excited, can I borrow your computer for 1 second? Can I go? If we can I go to a website? Magic. Wonderful, wonderful. So let's open up another one. If you guys want to join me at win, win.boca.js, just go to on your phone or on your laptop, .org, so win. Let me see, hold on a second. Win the bucket. Now we're going to give one ticket over here to this gentleman here. If you're ready to win, click on OK. So again, you go to win, as in I want to win. 6 of you guys have already figured it out. .bocajs.com. .org. I keep on saying .com all the time. win.bocajs.org. We're going to be giving away, we have for you guys, for every one of you guys, for simply entering, and you cannot have it unless you enter a yo-yo, a sticker of OAuth from anything you want. Yo-yos, everything else, ready to go. And you have a ticket, sir. So you have it over here. So we'll see if number 6 wins. If 6 number wins, we promise it's not going to be, oops. All right, and give me a second here. Whoa. Give me a second. Right, there's 15 of you guys. Okay, hold on. I presented this at the .NET group, how I did this, so if you guys were wondering how this magic works. Oh, jeez. Once we log in again. Who told me I had to be prepared for this? All right, let's do this. And the winner is... And if you guys get a noise, if you turn up your volume, you'll be able to hear the noise here. Boom. Yeah. Oh! I have another one for you. Number 6. And number 12. I have one already for you. That's why you remember that. Who's number 12, guys? Yay! Did you win before? Never won before. So guys, we have that's a free software from the WebStorm, from PHP Storm, from other things. Each one of them every month we give one out. I have one for you as well. So come on over afterwards and come on over. I'll get you your email and we'll send you guys the links. Okay? All right. Thank you very much, Joel. See you guys next month. Have some pizza.